Good evening, everybody, and welcome to We the People. Tonight, We the People meet Jared Pettinato. He is running as the U.S. House of Representative for the state of Montana. The representative. He's just one. He's got the district, which is the state. That's pretty insane. That's a lot of space to cover. It's like 1 million people, but they got the whole place to themselves. And the rep there has to cover the whole area. The current rep is somebody the progressive movement knows, not well, Greg Gianforte. He likes to beat on press. Jared is a drummer, and we're going to check out a song he drums on at the end of the show. But we're really excited to have him on and talk about what he can do to make Montana a better place. Jared, welcome to We the People. Oh, Christ. That was a terrible open because I had your audio off. Say that again.
Thank you for having me, John. I'm glad to be here.
All right. I screwed it up already, Laura. Thank you for being on, Jared. Before we talk about why you would run, Laura Livegood, please tell everybody what this is and how they can engage with Jared.
This is an engagement broadcast. So if you are in our live audience, you have the unique opportunity to ask questions of our guest. So if you've got a question, a good question, and I'm going to put his website in here so you can answer some of your questions before. If you got a good question for me, write question all in caps or tag me so I can see it. I can't do a lot of typing because you can hear it on camera. So just call it out for me and I will ask Jared when the time's right.
Thank you so much, Laura.
You're welcome.
Jared, so I'm reading here that you're a fourth-generation Montanan, so you know darn well that it only has one rep. Why would you choose to represent an entire state by yourself in this way?
Well, I love Montana, and I love Montanans. I've just grew up in Montana, and like you said, fourth generation. I grew up hiking in Montana's mountains, and fishing in Montana's creeks, and swimming in Montana's lakes. So I wanted to take this chance and take this opportunity to do what I could to make Montana strong and to build America.
Awesome. And that's there's build Montana strong. So you're running against a bunch of people in the Democratic. There's a whole bunch of people there going, right? 4 or 5.
There are 5 of us in total.
Okay.
Yeah, on the Democratic side, and then we got Gianforte, and then we just had a Libertarian candidate announced this week.
Interesting. We'll get into that, why that's interesting later, because Montana really does seem to be a little bit more on the freedom side of things in that regard. I would think Marcus grilled you a little bit about that. You guys, everybody who knows the program, Marcus, our content manager, and works with the volunteers to put together content. He got a chance to ask Jared some tough questions earlier today, so we're gonna go over those. The reason I bring up all the other Democrats is because regardless of the individual differences between you guys, there's seems to be a coalition that the Democrats can do better than what the Republicans are offering in Montana at this point. Do you agree?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of energy in Montana. A lot of people coming out who've never been involved, coming to their first Democratic meetings,
awesome.
Coming to their first protests. So we're part of a wave, and we're looking forward to taking back this seat for Montana. We haven't held it since the 90s.
Wow. And do you think Bernie Sanders' movement and Rob Quist, when he ran against Gianforte, is part of that surge? Do you think that's carried over?
I think it helps. It builds over time. And if you look at for example, if you look at the margins by which the Republicans have been beating the Democrats in this seat, over the last 10 years, it's gone from 150,000 and trended downwards to about 20,000. So you see that we're on the cusp of flipping this seat for the Democrats and using that to help the Democrats take over the House again.
That'd be fantastic. I mean, Quist didn't lose by that much. And, there were some reasons that a lot of people thought that Gianforte shouldn't have been in the race, right?
Yeah, including the end of the race, which is another reason for him not to have been in the race.
Yeah, exactly. So it's exciting that it sounds like there's a good progressive movement or wave of change that wants to happen in Montana. At the same time, we've got some scary things going on around the nation, not necessarily in Montana, although you've got your hate groups on the rise apparently. But I want to start with an issue that I'm curious how Montanans view, how you see your constituents talking about the issue of guns and gun safety. I'm going to use that word as opposed to gun control. Where do you stand, and what do you think we should do, and where do your constituents stand?
Well, when I watched what happened down in Lakeland, it just broke my heart. And to see children dying from guns in school where we want to keep them safe, that just doesn't strike me as the America that I know. So we need to move forward and we need to do more, because apparently what we're doing isn't enough. So we need to figure out exactly what to do and figure out how to move that forward. The Congress, for example, has actually prohibited, though, studying what health impacts could result from changing some of the gun laws.
Yeah, CDC. There's the Dickey's law, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the Center for Disease Control. They can't study how much guns impact health and safety.
Yeah.
So that's the place to start.
But they could easily like push for the motion to repeal that and let the CDC. Do we really need a study to know that we have a problem with guns in this country?
Well, we got a problem with guns. I think we all know that. We just got to figure out what we can do that will effectively help us with our problem.
What do you think we can do? How would you solve the gun problem in the United States of America?
Well, I think the first place to start is with studying to figure out what's effective, because we're trying to balance separate freedoms. In Montana, we take our gun rights pretty seriously. And so we're always trying to balance the freedom to own a gun against the freedom to go to school in safety and the freedom not to have to worry about your children going to school.
Do you really believe those are equivocal rights?
I don't know if I would say they're equivocal. I would say that at least the gun ownership one is in part in the Second Amendment. So as a constitutional lawyer, I give it some weight. Also, we have the right to life and liberty and property. And I think that's in a different amendment, part of the Constitution.
Sure.
So I think that has some weight too.
That would be the Declaration of Independence, as I was corrected. What was it, yesterday, day before, on the last We the People. It's in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which I think trumps whether you get to carry a gun. Honestly, I hate to use the word Trump, but I want to ask this. I know we don't have studies here in America. However, we certainly have plenty of other nations to look at that are doing much better in terms of everything than we are, including gun control. And the one major difference is gun laws. Even in countries that like guns, they have regulation, they have classes you have to, they demand that you know what the hell you're doing. Do you not feel that those kind of same things, hey, look, they're doing better over there, same thing with healthcare in every other country. Do you not feel that we could implement some of these basic things and see the improvements happen immediately?
I think those are great places to start. Those are basically studies done in the real world, absolutely. And
I'm not talking studies, I'm talking statistically, these countries show that they have almost zero. I mean, there are countries with no evidence, no gun violence whatsoever. We have, like, we're off the charts. Like our military, it's off the charts. So it's not studies. This is a country. Look at that country and that country and that country. You don't think that by looking at those countries and going, it works there, implement it here.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I agree. I think we need to look at all of those and figure out what works the best. And those are the things that we want to work on.
I'm trying to nail you down on that, because what you keep saying to me is that we should look at solutions. And I'm saying, no, they've looked at solutions. It's strict gun laws. It's removing assault weapons from the hands of civilians. Those two things have seemed to work well. Would you agree that we need to implement those things, or do you think we should do something different, or do you think it's not time to implement those things in our society?
Well, I'm not ready to go with the Australian example right now. I don't think that we need to take guns from all of the Americans.
Well, they took assault weapons away. They didn't take all the guns away. They took all their assault weapons away. You can still own a firearm in Australia, but you have to damn well work hard for it. You know.
Well, maybe I need to look at that a little bit further. Maybe I'm not up on what they did exactly in Australia.
But same with and I don't mean to pound you so much on the guns. I'm just curious, because are your constituents in the same feeling? Because I think the rest of the country is kind of in more of a mood of it's time to do something here. And how are you going to deal with that in Montana? I think that's more my question. Is the Republican Party and their whole going to win on that issue because of where they stand in general with the NRA?
Right. Well, I hear what you're saying. And in Montana, I mean, the first thing to do is always, and I know you've heard this from probably both sides, implement the gun laws that we have. because we're actually just not doing that.
True.
And that's a real problem. And the Republicans are undermining, for example, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
True.
They are undermining their funding, undermining their leadership, and undermining their effectiveness. So the first place to do is to, implement the laws that we have. And then we need to keep the guns out of the hands of the people who are dangerous. We need to keep them out of the hands of terrorists, keep them out of the hands of criminals, keep them out of the hands of people who are committing domestic violence acts, and also people who have mental difficulties.
Which we just repealed the law on, right?
Just last year, right? Yeah, exactly.
One of the first
We're going in the wrong direction.
Right.
We need to turn around and move forward.
Yes, so even the Democrats' worst would be better than what we have in the Republicans right now, is what we're kind of saying, which is sad. Sad.
Yeah. But then if you look at all the states too, they've been, doing things like the Stand Your Ground law, and they've been expanding gun rights, even as we have more problems with guns.
Right.
And I don't understand how we're going in that wrong direction against all of the evidence that we're seeing.
I think the NRA money has a lot to do with that, and the fact that we really don't have control, i.e. why you're running, of the people who represent us, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
we're not always responding to the broad consensus that we need to do more.
Exactly. And I appreciate you saying that. I haven't looked specifics at Gianforte's money. I do know that Montana has a lot of gun manufacturers and gun industry in your state. I mean, for what it's got for people. And I'm probably guessing he's a big fan.
Yeah, I believe he's, I saw one report that he was third on the list of taking NRA money.
Wow. I should have had that list. I'm surprised we don't have it in here. That's the third. That's pretty good.
And that's on top of him being the richest man in Congress. So I don't know why he needs that money in the first place.
I didn't realize he was the richest. You've got more information on Gianforte than we do. That's great. I didn't realize he was the richest man. So, damn.
Yeah.
NRA money is petty cash comparatively to what you can make off the global arms trade, right? It's nothing. It's really nothing. If you're selling F-35s and fossil fuels, you're making a lot more money, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's real money, right?
Yes, that's sales. That's what the Secretary of State does. Didn't you know? I didn't know that until Hillary Clinton.
I know. Well, you got to sell to both sides too. Don't forget.
We learned
Can't sell to just one side because then you only get half the sales.
Iran-Contra. We learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
I'm probably doing that before then, but that was my first awareness of it. Anyway.
In violation of law and all sorts of other things too, right?
It was the name of democracy. That's the justification, right? We have a problem with that. The U.S. populace is kind of waking up to the fact that we justify our warmongering. Do you agree with that? Let's just go with guns and militarization. Let's talk about that. Okay, American guns we're putting aside for now. What do you think about the military-industrial complex? Should it be cut down to what I call size? What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, it needs to be proportional to what's actually the threats that America faces. And we're still the biggest gorilla in the room. We spend more of our GDP on the military than any other nation. And we have countries that are eliminating their militaries because they know that the United States will just swoop in and clean up for them.
Sure.
And that's not our place to be. Congress has abdicated its responsibility to oversee the military actions that the United States has taken. We're still operating under authorizations for military force from 2001 and 2002
right.
that we passed in response to September 11th. So Congress needs to step in and do something about that. And then when you talk about the military-industrial complex, it's just a big jobs program. It's wealth transfers.
Yes, it's welfare.
And we've got better ways to spend our money.
We do. That was a great way to say it. We've got a lot of better ways to spend our money. And just before we move into the better ways to spend our money, because I really think we could still have the most gigantic, overcompensating military for the world and take a nice chunk out of it and pay for all the other stuff Americans want,
We can do a lot of that. And efficiencies, too. Did you see that there was a report just about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that said that an efficiency expert took a look at the military and found $100 billion of efficiency gains.
Oh, yeah. And the Pentagon loses trillions, just they barf and it falls somewhere. It's just, it's
in the couch cushions.
Yes. The couch cushions at the Pentagon. Good God, could you imagine?
Ask him the percentage, John, before.
Percentage of what?
What percentage would you cut military?
Right. Oh, this is a good question from the audience. Right. So Jilly Love is one of our regular audience members, and she wants this number. What percentage would you cut the military by, or is there a percentage you think the military should be of GDP, just in general?
Oh wow, I would need to do some more research to answer that one. I don't really know. Significantly.
I think the biggest one in competition is like 25%. That's China.
Oh, they spend 25% of their.
I think that's rough 20%, something like that. And I think we're well beyond. We're 57
of the government spending.
Yes,
perhaps. Is that what you're referring to?
Of our pie chart. 57% of our pie chart goes to our military. I think China they're down in the 20% range. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. They're trying to get a number from you. How much would you cut it by? You know.
I wish I could give a number. I don't know enough about the military.
That's honest. That's honest. I mean, so there you go, Julie. That's the honesty. It doesn't know. I mean, I get it. That's fine. It's hard to know. The military spends a ridiculous amount of money. Ridiculous amount.
Right. Well, there's what is it? The F-16 that they've spent
35
innumerable billions of dollars on, and they want a version like this and a version like that, and they have different pieces in all of the different districts, and so you have lots of defenders of the program.
Yes, aerospace is big wherever they can put down a factory, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the F-35 is the one we make for 35. All the other nations to use. Doesn't work well. We just make them. And they're expensive. So yeah. So military industrial complex. You agree it needs to be chopped down. I always just say half. Because even at half, it's way bigger than everybody else's still. And that's really what all the guys are trying to make sure stays, right? So,
right. We could just make it more efficient.
Yes, more efficient.
Lots of ways.
I agree with that. Healthcare. And to me, healthcare ties in with the violence that we seem to have going on around in our country. We seem to have an issue with not addressing mental health. Mental health was gutted by Reagan in California, then federally by Reagan. Mental health has not been addressed with our vets. Where do you stand on health care for humans in the United States and mental health?
Well, we all need health care. Everybody. This is America. It's not okay that we have people who are sick and who are injured and who can't afford and can't get the health care that they need and deserve. So we all need to have it. We've got to make sure that we design whatever system we design to get us there. And we're not there yet. We are doing better than we did with the system, 10 years ago, but we still have so much work to do.
All right. I can go with that. From your site, we can replicate the international market here in America to decrease costs. United States citizens pay for the research development for the whole world through very high pharmaceutical costs. I want Americans to pay the same amount they could pay in any developed nation as the market allowed. No importing drugs, no unnecessary risks, just a shortcut to make the market work for Montanans. Talk more about that. What do you think about the pharmaceutical industry and what's going on with that and the insurance industry and health?
Oh, sure, John. My experiences with the pharmaceutical industry go pretty deep.
Yeah.
I worked on Brian Schweitzer's campaign against Senator Conrad Burns in 2000.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you remember these days. Brian Schweitzer started with the bus going to Canada and bringing drugs back to America.
Was this something that Bernie was doing too?
He might have. I don't remember that one. Brian started it, I know. Bernie might have been doing that over in Vermont as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was connected because Bernie on the rallies was making mention of having done that, taking people from Vermont over in there. I didn't know if these guys were connected, so I hadn't really heard of what you're talking about. This was somewhere else. That's awesome, though. That's really cool. I forgot to tell everybody. I mean, tell everybody what you did for a living. You worked for the Justice Department. That was awesome.
Oh, yeah. I spent 9 years working at the United States Department of Justice, defending public lands, and here in Montana and throughout the United States of America. The United States trusted me with $16 billion of projects. They included wind farms in Nevada and California. They included highways and public rail to get people around more quickly. And I prevailed and succeeded in about 15 billion of those projects.
And what do you mean by that when you say defending? Like people come in, interests come in to say we're going to stop this from happening, and you're brought to court to make sure it goes through. What is that? What do you mean by that?
That's part of it. There's in the environmental circumstances, we call them, there are some NIMBYs, not in my backyard. So, for example, we were going through downtown LA and one hotel didn't want us digging up the street in front of it. And we said, well, we have to. The ground is not sturdy enough for us to dig underneath this part of the street. We can't build a subway from underground this way. And they really wanted us to go open up the street somewhere else.
Okay.
And they're going to make a ton of money in the future. There are going to be so many people that are going to be able to get to downtown LA riding the light rail from the airport pretty soon that they're going to make all their money back. So I don't see that they had a real gripe at that point. And they were trying to stop us.
You're putting public transportation that's running right by their place. I mean, gee,
yeah, they're going to have a stop like blocks away.
Okay. That's interesting to note. I mean, I didn't think about that. It's not in my backyard. When you're doing something that's in the public interest, and your family. I was reading you're a fourth generation Montana, and your family worked in the railroads until you. Why is that?
Well, I like to think that I still worked in the railroads.
Well, true.
I got a picture right back there.
Nice.
My great-grandfather moved here from Italy and worked on the railroads on the edge of Glacier Park, this little town called Essex. And so he worked there, and then my grandfather worked on the railroad, and my father worked on the railroad. And these are not like office jobs. My dad fixed track. He was down there with wrenches and crowbars.
Wow.
I used to ask him when I was young, what do you do, Dad? I was like 3 or whatever, and he'd say, oh, I just wrestle black bananas all day. So what is that? I don't know what that means. Okay, he was talking about railroad ties.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Wow.
So then I got to work on these public rails, which I look at as the next generation of rails. I also worked on some, tangentially on some high-speed rail issues over in California. And I also worked on some rails to trails issues, which are also the next step of railroading, which is turning them into recreational trails for bicyclists and walkers and hikers.
Oh, that's cool.
I like to think I still worked on rails.
We'll talk more about transportation as we get into environment and climate, because I know you're big on the climate. But right now, I want to bring in Laura Livengood because she's been indicating she's got some questions from the audience, right?
Well,
Laura?
there was a good question that kind of tied in with this. How does Jared feel about preserving agriculture and rural living off the grid? Because Montana is one of the few places left where you can still do that.
I was just reading today, thank you, Laura. I was just reading today that 40% of Montana's counties are actually decreasing in population. And so that's just it's a hard thing to look at. Those are people's lives, those are people's livelihoods. And it's getting harder to live a rural lifestyle. So that's part of one of the solutions I've seen, one of the opportunities I see for Montana that my experiences at the United States Department of Justice has shown me. I picked two of them. I call them the wind and the trees. So it's making money out of thin air and using the money that grows on trees to manage forests and to reduce high severity wildfires. So the wind energy in particular helps rural areas because in Montana, we have a ton of wind. Some people call us the Saudi Arabia of wind. Look at that purple up there. That's Montana.
Wow.
And so we have Oregon and Washington that have renewable energy targets. So they have demand, we have supply. And we can put these wind farms in rural towns and in places where there's tons of wind. It creates the best jobs in town. It brings money in for the landowners. It brings money in taxes as rent for the schools and for the state. So it's literally making money out of thin air. They actually have new transmission technology now that uses DC current and only takes half to a third as much of the lost electricity to move it longer distances.
Getting back into Tesla stuff here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we can use all that because Montana is a little distance from some of the cities. But if you use some of this new technology, we just siphon it to a place, move it across, and they can use that energy out in Seattle and Portland.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's efficient because it's without loss, and that's fantastic. And so we got wind and trees. I know Montana used to have a lot of forests. It's probably been cut down a bunch. Do you think it needs to be rebuilt? This is from your site. Talk about that.
Absolutely. And that's a good picture right there because it shows those are all dead lodgepole pines.
Ah,
I think they're beetle kill, I think right there. And there are some really pretty severe examples of that. And we do still have a lot of forests in Montana. But what happened, we actually created this problem of high severity wildfires. Last year in August, we burned 1.2 million acres in Montana.
wow.
We only have 93 million acres in the whole state.
Was that burn on
So
purpose? Was it slash and burn? What was the, or was it just fire season, or what was it?
just fire season, wildfire season.
Okay.
And fires have been burning hotter. We've been spending more and more money trying to eliminate the wildfires. And this all kind of arises because we created the system that generates and causes and creates the conditions for high severity wildfires. For 80 years, we took out the largest trees in the forest. We suppressed the wildfires, and that's allowed fuels to build up on the ground of the forest,
Right.
down trees and branches. And it's also allowed these spindly trees to grow up next to the big trees. So when the fire comes in, it burns hotter on the surface, and then it lifts up into the canopy and causes these high severity wildfires.
Absolutely.
So we created this problem, and I believe we have a responsibility to fix it.
It's not unlike the Dust Bowl, where we didn't realize what we were doing to our topsoil. Right.
Exactly. And we just want to restore the fire to a natural part of the system so that we don't have to manage it as much because it's just gotten out of control.
Absolutely. I think a lot of states, a lot of places, certainly federally, they've cut dollars for forest management everywhere, right? Because they don't give a shit about the forest. I mean, Trump wants to mine it and put drill in it, and he wants to drill in Yellowstone.
Right. So Congress, their position, they say, well, Forest Service, we're going to give you this amount of money, and go stop the wildfires,
right?
Because that's really super important. And if you got any money left over, go do some wildlife restoration and watershed restoration and do some management.
Right.
And that worked okay in the 90s when it was 16% of the Forest Service's budget for fighting wildfires. Now it's over 50%. By 2025, it'll be 2/3.
Oh my gosh, you're talking the expense, the budgetary expense of fighting wildfires has gone from 16% to over 50%
of the Forest Service's budget. Exactly.
As their budget is being cut.
Right. And the management that they want to do would reduce the wildfires. So it's this downward spiral where they have less and less resources to do the work to stop the fires. And then the fires get hotter and then they have less resources.
There's a pattern here. Because it's all about preventative, right? Proactiveness, not reactive. America is like a dumb puppy. I love that quote from Johnny Depp. He said that back after 9/11. He said, America is going to react like a dumb puppy. And we did. We don't take proactive measures. With our healthcare, we could be taking proactive measures, but we don't, right? With our fires, if we invested money into forest management, we could lessen the severity to an extent, but then we got to get into climate change. So where do you stand on the global climate crisis and what we need to do as a nation to fight it?
We need to do everything we can. People who deny climate change, to me, are the modern flat Earth society.
Yes, except we have both. We have both.
We do. Someone just commented to me on social media that they believe in climate science and climate change, but they still believe that the Earth is flat.
Which is that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
It's science, right? Science to me is our method of predicting the future.
Yeah, well, and to some extent, yes.
And so when 97% of the people are telling you the future is going this direction, that's as good a proof to me as I need. I believe that the Earth is round. I've never seen the round Earth with my own two eyes, I admit. But I believe it because the scientists tell me that it's true and because everything works consistently with that.
NASA takes a lot of pictures, and I trust their pictures. I'm going to go with
believe that moon landing. Is that right, John?
Well, Mythbusters shot a laser to the moon to disprove the whole thing. So if we just get these people to watch Mythbusters more than they watch Fox News, maybe we could fix the problem. So, I mean, backing out of the Paris Climate Agreement was probably not the best idea in your mind. Although, really, the Paris Climate Agreement is not enough. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, there's all sorts of things. The Paris Climate Agreement is not enough. backing out of it was the wrong direction.
Right.
But also, we've seen a lot of positive steps lately that are helping us go in that direction nonetheless. And those are encouraging me.
Yes.
I fear, though, that we're already a little bit too late. I'm not sure that we can do enough to keep moving and stop climate change.
Well, human beings have shown that when their ass is really on fire, they get moving. So I'm hoping that, but you're right. I mean, we already know we're about 20 years too late. Scientists told us that already. But there seems to be, I think, to me, the edge is going to be science, the cutting edge of science, and being able, these new technologies that are coming up with. Wind farms were not this efficient 20 years ago. Solar has just gone through the roof. Batteries, people that say you can't use the sun at night, we have batteries, everybody. And they work.
And hydro pump storage, right?
Right. See, there's
Have
so
you
many.
seen that?
No, that's that hydro pump storage. I think that's a new one on me. Please explain.
Oh, yeah. We have one right here in Martinsdale, Montana, that they're building. And it's not actually connected to any existing water source, but it just takes water from downhill, pumps it uphill, and then uses it just like a hydro facility. So that it uses about, I think it saves and it regenerates about 3/4 of the energy. So you lose about 25% by doing this process, but it lets you save that and store that potential energy and turn it back into electricity.
That's
So
brilliant.
when you're overproducing, you pump it up, and then when you need the energy, you let it go, get your energy back, 3/4 of it.
I love it. Sounds like a great idea. It sounds like something you need to have a degree for. You can tell me more about it, but I want you to segue into education and what you think we should do there, because it doesn't seem to be doing good for education. And should our schools look like prisons? I guess I'll tie that on there.
Oh my goodness. Well, the first thing we do is we keep public money in public schools.
Nice.
We're not going to start spending money on private school. If you want to send your kid to a private school, that's your opportunity. This is America. You can do that. But that doesn't mean that the taxpayers need to subsidize that other institution. We have institutions. We have public goods. We have public schools. I went to public school.
Me too.
I think they're great. And I loved my teachers and I support them. And I want them to continue to have unions. That's coming up in the Supreme Court, as I'm sure you saw.
Yeah.
And they deserve a union. They deserve a collective voice, because for me, unions are such a huge thing. Corporations, shareholders, really, already have a collective to collectively bargain on their behalf. We call it a corporation.
Right.
So it only makes sense that the workers would have one as well. And the same thing with the government. They have a collective. It's called the government. So you need a collective to bargain against the other collective. Otherwise, you can divide and conquer and extract resources from the less powerful minority.
But Jared, we have a right to work. That's the same, isn't it?
It's a right to get paid less, because you are competing with your other fellow laborers for the lowest cost that you would take the job for.
Welcome to capitalism, though, really.
That's what capitalism does. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're going to take, that's a great answer, by the way. I love your statements on that. We're going to take a pause because I see some questions popping through here, and I'm interested to hear. Laura Livengood, please.
Yeah, we got lots of questions. I do want to acknowledge the question that Natural Perez asked, because you didn't really quite answer that, because she was talking about preserving agriculture and living off the grid. And I think you started talking about demographics of the state a little bit. So I'd invite you to talk about a little about that, and tie in Jilly's question about, would you ban fracking and fossil fuel pipelines in Montana? So,
all right. I apologize for not answering that first one. And agriculture, we have to support our farmers. Organic farming is the next wave, and it's our next opportunity, because we're seeing more and more demand from people who want that. And when you have that demand, then you want to meet that. And we've got to support our farmers. We have to get them broadband. Here in Montana, they don't all have broadband internet capabilities, and that's not something to go through the modern world without. It's how we all connect. It's how we make more efficiencies. So we need to do that. We need to support our farmers.
Nice. I like that. I really like what you said there. And I think you answered the GMO question. Do you feel that we should be using GMOs?
I don't think that that's necessary to use them. They're a risk. They're a really big risk. And when we look at what for example, Roundup Ready alfalfa does, and how it starts to invade other species, and we start to lose some of our crops. And it frightens me a little bit, because I don't think that we know exactly what's going to happen, and I'm not sure I trust it.
Well, and there's a lot of evidence, and certainly other countries have already banned Roundup because they've shown that it causes cancer, or can cause cancer. And here in the United States, capitalism wins, it seems. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, Laura. Would you please repeat the second question?
Would you ban fracking and fossil fuel pipelines?
Heading into environment anyway. So.
Yes. Yes.
Well, on the pipelines, there are a lot of pipelines. I don't know if you guys have seen the maps lately, or they're everywhere. Yeah. And we don't require corporations to monitor and secure and maintain their pipelines.
Nope.
Corporations right now can just run their pipelines, and when there's a leak, they can say, "Oh, there's a leak," and then go try to fix it. But some things you can't fix. Sometimes it gets in your water, and it gets places where it doesn't belong. So I think we need stronger enforcement and stronger laws that require corporations to maintain their pipelines and to check their pipelines periodically to make sure that they're not leaking, that they don't have gaskets that are corroding, and to make sure that we can protect our natural resources where they already exist. I think that's the first place to start. Do we need more? I'm not sure we need more. I need to look into that a little more.
Pipelines? Do you believe we should continue to use fossil fuels as we transfer? I mean, we're on our way through a renewable revolution. Do we really need to continue to mine fossil fuels?
I'd like to see us move to fuel cells and wind farms and solar, and that's our future.
Okay.
It's non-polluting energy.
Okay. So, and then the other piece of the question would you ban fracking in the state of Montana? Because fracking has been shown to be horrific to water tables and cause earthquakes.
Yeah, well, I need to look at that a little bit in more detail. I know we have the fracking rule that's gone back and forth in court when the Obama administration was trying to put some safety valves on it and try to make sure that it's safe. But there's a lot of risks to our water, and we're pumping poisonous chemicals into the ground. And I can't believe that that's the best idea that we have in this modern world.
No.
I'm hoping we can move away from gasoline entirely to fuel cells. That's what I want to do.
Well, that would be great. I mean, if you truly believe that we're possibly too late to really fix climate change, that I would think ending our use of fossil fuels is paramount to that shift. Yeah. Or maybe we'll just say it's too late. Enjoy your gas guzzler. Drive. Right.
Yeah. Oh. Well, when we're too late, there are three things that we can do in response to climate change. Once it starts to get going, we can retreat, and we're going to end up doing that in some places. I think Miami is going under. We can try to mitigate, so we can build walls and see what we can do to stop the tide. And then we can try to use natural systems to deal with some of these things, figure out where we have rivers that we can use that are helpful, and use other actual natural systems to help us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. Laura, any other questions you want to hit?
Yeah, let's go. I'm going to throw you an easy one. Cannabis.
I want to leave it to the states.
Leave it to the states. What is your personal feeling on it?
I think each state can figure out what it wants to do about it. I remember my grandmother dying from breast cancer. And for a long time, I felt guilty because I thought maybe I could have gotten her, this was years and years ago. I thought I had some friends and I could have gotten her some marijuana to help her with the pain and help her eat. And so I'm definitely in favor of medical marijuana. Recreational, I'm open to it.
Well, I use it for all sorts of things, so I hope that you'll keep that in mind. It's and Montanans. I mean, you've been walking the road. You've been on the road. You've been knocking on doors, talking to people, doing town halls. What do your constituents say? What are they telling you their big issues are?
Their big issues are, they come back to healthcare.
Okay.
A lot, and lately it's been guns.
Okay. And what are they saying to you about this?
Well, I hear a lot of frustration when I go around Montana. I hear a lot of people who are frustrated that they're working harder and not getting as much as they used to get, that their health premiums keep going up and their wages aren't rising to meet that. So they're feeling squeezed,
Okay.
and they're feeling like they need some help to help them move forward.
So, since you talked about feeling squeezed, where do you stand on a $15 an hour minimum wage and a living wage?
We've got to increase wages. There's a few different ways to do that. One is increase the minimum wage, and we need to do that. I don't know about $15 everywhere. I'd have to look at that a little bit deeper. It's cost of living needs to work into there somehow in my mind. You can increase minimum wage. You can use unions and strengthen unions so that they can bargain for higher wages. And then you can also try to use the supply and demand curve to increase wages. So increasing demand for labor is one way to increase wages itself. The Republicans always lean on that third one. They always say, oh, just decrease the cost of business, then they'll have more employees and then wages will go up. And that's the trickle down fallacy that just doesn't work, that they tried again with this new tax bill that's just taking money from our children and grandchildren and giving it to rich corporations and rich people right now. So I'm less in favor of that, but I think we can expand unions and sector unions. Are you familiar with sector unions, John?
Not specifically, no.
So the current way a union would work, it would be a union for one company, for example, or two companies. And so the people within that one company would organize. And it doesn't work right now for franchises. So if you're a McDonald's, you have to unionize each McDonald's separately. You can't just unionize all McDonald's workers. So that gives the employers a huge incentive to try to prohibit unions and try to cut back on unions, because it can threaten the very existence of their businesses. If you have to spend more money at the hardware store because they're unionized than at a different hardware store because they're not unionized, then that first hardware store is in jeopardy of existing. Sector unions get around that problem. They say, we're just going to organize hardware employees. We're going to organize
so that's
service.
Local iron workers, isn't that like the local, that's the iron worker, union worker, the trade unions, the sector is similar? Is that what you're talking about?
That's closer to it. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you get them all together so that you're part of the union, and the union negotiates with all of the businesses.
That collective bargaining concept. Amazing idea. But the question was a $15 an hour minimum wage, and you were kind of not sure about that. And I just want to say, and you mentioned cost of living. If cost of living had increased equally with inflation, we'd be at $26 an hour. So 15 is kind of like a bargain.
I haven't looked at the numbers on where I'd like to set it. I think Seattle's trying 15, and I'm looking at that.
Seattle's done. That's done.
Yeah, and I think it's working great as far as I can tell. I know there's one study out there that says it didn't work so well, but I don't really agree with that study.
Right. My favorite is Amsterdam. They pay a living wage over there, and they charge the same for the Big Mac, actually less than they do over here. So McDonald's knows they can do this. They know they can do this.
Right. Well, right now, it's all the profits are getting siphoned up to the corporate management and the shareholders.
Let me ask you a question about that. Do you think there should be caps on CEO wages? It used to be that it was considered the gentleman CEO. A CEO was making great, was doing good if they were making 20 times what their base employee was making. They moved that up to 25 times somewhere in the 70s because they were greedy. Now it's 450 times in America. Do you think we should have a regulation on that?
I'm trying to figure out exactly how to deal with that. I don't think that's acceptable because it's way too high. That proportion is too high.
Agreed.
So can we talk about the dynamics for a moment?
Sure. Sure.
We're going to go back to collective bargaining again, if you go with me.
Sure.
So the greatest thing about capitalism is it reduces price to marginal cost. And what I mean by that is that when different people compete, they sell things for less until it costs about the rock bottom price. So, and that works great when you're talking about cell phones and cars and bricks. It works less well when you're talking about people, because when people compete for the lowest price, they're competing for the lowest wages that they can survive. And that's an unacceptable result of capitalism, to have pushing people down to survival wages and even below survival wages. Because then when you get below survival wages, then the government tries to prop you up with food stamps and rental subsidies and some of these other things.
Not anymore. They've taken those away.
Well, they're taking those away. Yeah, I know. And that's why people are living even below the survival wages. That's why you have people who are working at Walmart and on food stamps and on all these other government subsidies.
And they're 80.
Yeah. And that's
so. How do you fix this? You've talked about, to me, when you say to me with capitalism, the great thing about it is it brings the price down. Well, it brings the price down at the expense of the employee, not at the expense of the company. So,
right.
Tell me how you would fix this. Where are you going here with what's better?
Well, that's why we use unions. So when you collectively bargain, then you can negotiate for higher wages and lift your wages up beyond survival wages and to a reasonable wage.
All right.
So that's the first place. So then that would decrease your proportion from 450 down a little bit. The problem at the top comes from companies competing over how much they're willing to pay the CEO. So the CEO, in that sense, they're the limited supply. And so corporations are competing over how much they can pay the CEO. And the CEO just waits until the one pays them the most. And I don't...
Really? You think there's just an elite group of CEOs that wanders around and that's a limited supply waiting for a company to offer them a giant chunk of cash?
For the CEOs in demand? Yeah. And so different corporations will offer them different amounts of money and they'll decide. And they can go unemployed for a little while because they've got their tens of millions of dollars in the bank.
So regulations, restoring Dodd-Frank, repealing Citizens United, these things, don't you think these would help fix some of these issues? Putting regulations back on corporations, taxing them higher. Do you think we should corporations pay a higher tax rate?
I don't think these tax cuts we did now were a good idea. Yeah, I think we should go repeal the whole tax bill, except for the stuff that actually helped middle class people.
Was there anything in there that did? I don't know. They tried to make it seem. I don't think there was, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, do you think we need to be stricter on corporations in general? Just go there.
Absolutely. Yeah, they keep extracting all the wealth, and I really like unions as a counter position to that. The quantity of union membership has gone from 40% in the 60s to about 6.5% today.
Wow, that is a low number.
And a huge drop.
Yeah. And
the 60s, that was when these are all the wage numbers that you've been using when the wages were high, when the world was a better place, when workers got more money and they could afford college.
Yeah, college was affordable. Things were affordable. Yes.
You could go work for the summer and pay for a quarter or pay for 2 quarters of college.
And now those same baby boomers are denying millennials the same. It's interesting. But yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so I agree with you on the unions. You want to see, and you want to see more regulation come in for the corporations. Minimum wage, though, that's something. Are you hearing from your constituents in Montana, small business owners, people worried about having to go up that high on wage? Or let me tie it into this. I know, as a former small business owner who could barely afford to pay an employee a decent wage, that if I had to tack on actual health insurance, I never would have been able to afford it. Do you think, and we were talking about this in Green Room, where I say this is where the federal government comes in, helps out the employer with this bill. Do you think federal government needs to take a bigger role in our health insurance to help out the small business owner to deal with those higher wages?
In some ways, I see that as the greatest benefit of single payer.
Okay.
Because it actually decreases the costs of goods for American products and helps America compete with goods produced overseas. Just like you're saying, in America, when you calculate a cost of good, it includes health insurance. But if you're in Europe or you're somewhere else, then the government's paying the health insurance. You don't calculate that into how much you're selling your goods.
Right.
So then we America are at a competitive disadvantage against countries overseas.
Yeah.
And that's the best. That's one of the best advantages of single payer that I see.
All right. So you would be, and we, my understanding of single payer and what I would like to see it come down to is really that the government handles the transaction and the insurance companies are no longer part of the bargain. How do you feel about that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm quite following you.
So I mean, basically, when we do it, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Where does the money come from?
Well, the money comes from the federal government. The money comes from us. It comes out of the military budget. It comes right out of that military budget. It could easily cover all Americans' healthcare, education, housing, put our vets in homes, get them off the streets. Anyway, going to that. Laura.
Yeah, there's lots there.
there is lots there. You've been awesome, man. I love talking to you. Laura Livengood, do we have any other questions from the audience?
There's lots of questions, but I don't think we're going to get to them. But I think that from Montana, we've got Montana Melissa here saying she's curious to know what you think your biggest challenge will be to get on the ticket against Gianforte.
Oh, yeah.
My biggest challenge. I think all of the Democrats have challenges here. We're all running at basically 0% name recognition. We all started with that.
Wow.
And so none of us were known statewide. And so it's really a matter of getting out and getting our messages out and talking to people and building momentum. So,
well, we're there. So let's talk about that. Let's just talk about what you need, what help you need. We didn't talk about Gianforte that much, although, and I'm just going to, you tell me, it seems to me, based on what I'm seeing in the numbers, with the way things are going with Republicans, Gianforte, looks like some Democrat has a good chance of unseating him in this upcoming. Do you feel that?
I think if we pick the right Democrat, we can do it.
And why would you be the right Democrat?
Well, I'm the right Democrat because this is based on Bill Clinton's analysis. How do you beat an incumbent? And he beat an incumbent, if you remember. He said you have to give the people everything that they like about the guy they got, something they don't like about the guy they have, and something that you have that the guy they have doesn't have.
All right.
And I have all of those things. Gianforte, when he runs, he basically makes two arguments. He says, I built a business worth $1.5 billion and sold that. And I created all of these Montana jobs. And that's really his argument that he makes. And I have responses, the best responses to both of those. The first one, he says he made a business worth $1.5 billion. I last year saved the taxpayers up to $1.5 billion in one motion. So I compete and play on the same level that he does. And when he says, I've created these Montana jobs, that's happened already. He has not done anything that I have seen. He has not come up with any idea, any act, any bill to grow Montana jobs. And so I don't think he's doing much for that. I actually have plans for growing jobs. And that's the wind in the trees. It's making money out of thin air and bringing in wind energy. And it's using the money that grows on trees to manage the forests and reduce high severity wildfires. Last year, we also lost, we have a $7.1 billion recreation industry here in Montana.
Wow, that's huge.
And with all the fires, people weren't coming.
Right.
And so we lost $240 million of lost tourism dollars. And those were jobs right there that we lost.
Wow.
So we need to keep those, and we need to build more with the wind in the trees. And the trees that's one of the benefits of managing our forests, is keeping that $240 million.
That is so true.
So between those two things, and then I've got some good contrast with Gianforte, where he committed a misdemeanor last year and pled guilty. I worked for the United States Department of Justice, and I think that's a really big contrast. And I have spent my adult life working in public interest. I've got real ideas for moving Montana forward, and I think the people in Montana are going to see that.
That's awesome. So no body slamming the press out of you?
I'm running on a reporter safety platform.
Nice. I'm sure the reporters in Montana appreciate that very much.
I think they do. I think that's true.
Yeah, I was showing that picture of everybody. If you remember, this is the guy that shouldn't have even been allowed to take his place as a rep. He roughed up or beat up a reporter, lied about it to a cop, then tried to get out of getting his mugshot taken because he thinks he was some kind of elite white dude or something. We got to get this guy out of there, and Jared here is giving his best shot at it. And I really appreciate you being on the program, Jared. Tell everybody where they can go to help you, your website, your Twitter, your Facebook, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, John. My website is montanansforjared.com. My Twitter is at Jared_Pettinato. I'm at Facebook.com/BeyondParty. And that's the name of the book that I wrote. I'm trying to get it published.
Nice.
And I would appreciate everyone if they could pitch in a couple bucks. It would help me get my message out and put some gas in the tank so I could go see some Montanans. And
and all those links are in the description of the video as well for perpetuity.
Awesome. What's this picture with you by Snow Jesus here?
That's the Whitefish Jesus.
The Whitefish Jesus? I'm not even familiar with that. Tell me about the Whitefish Jesus.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm born and raised in Whitefish. So this is the Jesus that the Knights of Columbus put at the top of Chair 2 on Big Mountain. It's now called the Whitefish Mountain Resort.
All right.
And a few years ago, these people from Wisconsin came and sued the Forest Service to remove the Whitefish Jesus for offending the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. They said that the Jesus if this is Forest Service land, that the ski hill leases from the Forest Service. And by allowing this Jesus on there, the United States has established religion. So my colleagues defended it, and the judge said, no, that's not what we mean when we say Establishment Clause. They get to keep the Whitefish Jesus. So that's the Whitefish Jesus.
All right. Well, I think somebody should just put a Whitefish Satan up there next to it. Just say, there you go. Why not? If you can have a Jesus.
I wanted different religious icons at all the chairs. That was my proposal, because that would have satisfied the Supreme Court.
That's great. Put a Buddha over here, a Ganesh over here. You know?
A Native American, something at the top. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea. If you guys couldn't hear, my cat showed up from outside. It's raining really hard. Kitty's in here all wet. It's climbed in through the back door. So if you didn't hear that on camera. You've been awesome. Sorry for the intrusion with the kitty. Everybody didn't know. I pushed out a tweet earlier about this. You're a drummer, which is really cool. I don't know when you were in D.C. Were you in D.C. doing this? It says you're a D.C. band that you were playing with here?
Yeah. When I was at the Department of Justice, I lived in D.C.
There you go. Okay, so your closing song is a song you're drumming on. This is really cool. Tell us about this and why you picked it.
Absolutely. This is a song that my band Freeform Radio wrote and recorded, and the song's called Crash and Burn, and the Kickstarter campaign wanted us to help them with the song so that they could put us in their video, and so they gave us a copy of the video for ourselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And if you guys were seeing this is so cool. I'm a guitar player. I want one of these things. It's a Kickstarter for, what is the company called? I forget. It's a...
they changed the name on me, and I'm trying to remember what it is
this
right
says
now.
Fret Zealot.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
This is the coolest thing. It's just the coolest thing. The song's great too, and you're a good drummer. 3-piece.
Oh, thanks.
Nice.
Thanks.
Takes talent to play 3-piece.
We'll have to put something together sometime.
I would. Well, Jeff Pearson, you hear that? I'll have to put together like across the country progressive rock. Oh, that's frightening. I'm a big fan already. Jared, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Good luck with your campaign. And would you come back? Would you come back and use this platform to talk with your constituents again?
Absolutely. This is great. I really appreciate you guys having me. This has been fantastic. Thanks for all your time and all your work and putting into this.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Laura Live and Good, thank you for all you do.
You're quite welcome.
Everybody, we'll see you. Oh, who do we have next week, Laura? Before we go, do we know? Do you know?
Oh, gosh. Yes, I do know. Next week, we have Michael Hepburn is going to be on Monday. And where is he from?
I don't have the
He's
cards.
In Florida, 27th District. And on Wednesday, we have Terry Gibson, who is running for governor in New York.
Awesome. Looking forward to both. Thank you all for being here. See you next week. This is Freeform Radio performs Crash and Burn with Fret Zealot, the coolest damn guitar add-on I've ever seen.